Welcome. So we are going to start chatting about something that started on Monday, which was International Women's Day, and the concept of choose to challenge. Now, it's International Women's Day, but clearly I am not a woman, and I do have a very, very famous woman with me, Dr. Tanvi Gautam, my friend and my colleague. Tanvi, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I am so excited that this is giving us an excuse to hang out together, Andrew. Uh, we have we have somebody joining in from Europe, although I can't see who they are, but they said Europe, so I'm guessing they're joining us from Europe.
Awesome, awesome. And uh, Steve says he's the most famous, unfamous speaker in America from Tampa, Florida. All right, so
Hello.
we have an international audience. So I'd like to introduce you since we're on my stream. So I guess I will go first. You and I go way back, and in fact, when we first met, you didn't even like me. Is that not true?
That is so true, Andrew. I looked at you and I was like, damn that guy. I don't like him.
Oh, okay. So unconscious bias goes both ways with genders, right? What was it, a gender bias, or was there something else you didn't like about me?
Well, Andrew, I think anybody who knows you, anybody who looks at a picture of you, they forms an image in their head about who they think you are, right? And we do that. I guess it's human nature, right? A bias
Yeah.
at the end of the day is a cognitive shortcut.
Yeah.
So, based on our limited interaction, I made sure that I was my truly human biased self, and I didn't like what I saw at all.
All right. Well, I didn't even notice you, and this is why you didn't like me, because I was in my man's club. We met at a professional event, and I was a established member of that particular association, and I was hanging out with my buddies. I was having bro time, and you were on the outside, weren't you? All right. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's what triggers us, is that we are on the outside. But since we started working together, I got to know you, and we've worked together on multiple projects, such as the Women in Leadership program at Singapore Management University, which was your program, correct?
That's right. So, just as I am quick to recognize my own biases, I'm also very quick to correct them, I should say, right? So,
Yep.
I wasn't going to give up on you just because you were locked into your rose circle, so to speak, because let's face it, you are a very well known executive coach. And when I sat down to design a program and I was thinking about, well, who are some of the people in my network whose work I respect? The question for me was I going to let my biases come in the way? Was I going to choose to challenge my own biases about somebody I knew?
I see
And
what you
that's
did
where,
there. Choose to challenge. Yeah. So one of the things that for the audience, if you don't know Dr. Tanvi Gautam, she's best-selling author, PhD, advocate for leadership for both genders, but specifically a champion as well for women leaders. But whenever I've collaborated with Tanvi, what I love about her is her ability to challenge. I've seen her see right into the soul of an up and coming woman leader, and really see that thing that she needs to challenge in herself. And her insight is just transformational. And people, they hear this message and go, oh, wow, that's it. And I think you have a special gift for that, Tanvi. So it's always fun watching you work.
I appreciate that, Andrew. And here's the thing, you can only see in others what you have in yourself. And I love the fact that, that famous saying, iron sharpens iron. I think that's the secret to our collaboration, that we are always, pushing each other. And, that perspective works so well. But I think if we are done with our mutual admiration club, we should get ourselves started on our LinkedIn Live.
So it's time to challenge. And I think the first statement to challenge, and I don't know whether you want to challenge me or I should challenge on you, but I think the first challenge is that classic statement, women are more emotional. So are women more emotional? Do you want to take the challenge or do you want to challenge me?
This is worth challenging. This is so worth challenging. All those of you who are listening to us live, I'm so curious. What comes up for you when you hear the statement, women are more emotional than men? Because let's face it, this is a very common statement that flies around in conversations around gender and leadership, right? Oh, she's so emotional. Or worse, if you're in a meeting and you have this strong opinion on something and people say, don't be so emotional, right? Has anyone maybe said that to you, or you've kind of seen someone say it to you? Have you ever said some to someone, Andrew? I'm trying to look for comments right
No. Look, in my experience, I really think it's an individual thing. I mean, I think we're all, as human beings, we're both logical and we're emotional. I mean, it's the nature of the way we're wired, right? We have emotions and some are strong emotions. But during the pandemic last year, I was coaching male leaders who were curled up rather on the floor, sucking their thumbs because everything had gone pear shaped. And at the same time, I was coaching women leaders who were leaning in and concerned about their people, articulating their message. And it would be very dangerous to go political here so early in a live, because anytime we mention a political figure, obviously there's going to be people that see both sides. But we saw a lot of strength from Jacinda Ardern in terms of her ability to communicate a clear message. Um, and so we saw around the world other times men being emotional. So I don't think that this is a gender issue. And I think if people have a bias that one gender is more emotional than the other, it's wrong. And the absence of emotion doesn't really help us very much. Sometimes we need to get emotional. How many times do I have to tell people, or ask people, what do you really feel about this? Because that is the human experience. So if, as some people say, well, why do we even need a Women's Day? Well, one day we won't need one because the biases will be gone, maybe. But in the meantime, let's blow this up as an absolute BS. And BS in this case stands for belief system, that this is just a belief system. It's rubbish. There is no evidence that women are more emotional in a negative sense than men. Maybe
now.
they are more empathetic in certain situations than men, but I know men that are empathetic and women that are not. So I don't think it's a bias. I don't think it's gender.
It's when sometimes when people say to me, "Oh, stop being so emotional," am I being am I being over emotional, or are you not being emotional enough? I mean, I have to ask whether the state of toxicity that we have seen in some corporate circles, would it be very different if we had more people who felt much more strongly, passionately, and expressed it about the way we see leaders and the kind of cultures that get created in organizations sometimes. And maybe, just maybe, it's not that women are more emotional, but that men are constantly being told, be a man, right?
Well, I mean, I'm of an age where I was brought up with big boys don't cry, right? But there have been times in my life where I've bawled my eyes out, and that was the most therapeutic thing I could do. Um, Obviously, right in the depths of the pandemic, when we were all turning to this virtual world, I had to remind people that they needed to check in with people. We couldn't be transactional in meetings. We needed to find out and what is the emotion of the people on the other side of the camera, or have got their cameras switched off because they daren't show us their home situation. So I think emotion in this particular time is important. So if women are more emotional, then perhaps they have an advantage.
Mm, I agree. Isn't it beautiful the way we have arrived at this idea that, you know, it's part of it is social conditioning about, what men are allowed to express, what men are not allowed to express, how women are perceived if they express emotion, and why it is important to express emotion in the workplace. The interesting thing is this, Andrew. given my research, you would be hard pressed to find research on emotions in the workplace till
Oh,
decision
you you
making.
fr- you froze on me there, Tanvi. Did you want to just say that again?
Am I back? Talking about the
You're back.
research
You're
and
back.
yeah, the
Mm.
research around the fact that we didn't study emotions in the workplace because we used to believe that emotions interfere with decision making, and that we want to be the rational economic man, so to speak. But given all the work that I do on storytelling, the idea of harnessing emotions for connection and communication is back in the workplace in such a big way that I think we want to explore this idea of emotionality in the workplace, not from a negative lens, constructive lens.
Very good. So then that brings us to the next challenge, then, right? Because if we're
Yeah.
worried about how we're perceived, whether we're emotional or logic, then the next challenge is around likability or respect, right? Has anybody heard that? As a woman, even as a man, I've got this choice: am I likable or do I go for respect? I think I might. Can I take a bit of the Can I take the lead on the challenge on that one for a moment? Oh,
I think you should challenge it totally. I mean, I can tell you that sometimes I feel like I am being challenged to think about likability or respect. Now, what choice do I make is something we can talk about later in the conversation. But I'm curious to know. I mean, if someone comes to you and they are struggling with this idea, how would you challenge them?
well, let me start with a story because, as you and I are both storytellers, I think it's a good story, and it's a fresh story because it happened this morning. I have a group coaching call on a Thursday morning, and at the moment, the group is all men. In fact, they're all men from tech in the United States. But I had a call during the week from one of my graduates of this program for last year, and she said, "I've got that job we were preparing for. I'm going for the big interview. I need to refresh the material." I said, "Well, why don't you jump on the group call and we'll see how you're going?" So she jumped on the group call and I put her straight in the hot seat as if I was interviewing her. And to see how much she had remembered and how much executive presence she was projecting, and she did really well. And then a member of the group talked about bias, gender, ethnicity, etc., and she came up with a beautiful answer. And and she said, having worked through my self-esteem, my self-confidence, I now realize that, I walk in a room, yes, I'm going to be potentially judged as a woman of Indian origin, and possibly even some ageism. Am I old enough to have the expertise? But what I have now done is let all of that go. And I just focus on what is my value, what is the information that I have, and how do I connect that value to the audience, which is something that she and I worked on last year. And it was just beautiful to hear her completely embodied that. She knows that bias is going to exist, but she's not going to pay any attention to it. So the challenge here, it's not a question of likability or respect. It's a question of authenticity. Do you know who you are? Do you know what your value proposition is? Can you communicate that value proposition? And then what other people think about you is none of your business. If you do all of the right things, the right people are going to like you and respect you. But if you spend all your time focusing on, am I getting their respect or am I getting their likability, you're going to fall on your face because it's too much to worry about. So that's my challenge to that. What do you think, Tanvi? You agree or disagree?
Well, I do agree. I want to go a little bit deeper into this because even if we decide not to care, right, and we are able to convey our value proposition, at the end of the day we are being perceived through filters and lenses of other individuals who are constantly grading us based on likability and respectability, right? So it's that old one which we talk about so often, that if a man is being assertive, he's seen as respectable and likable, and then if a woman is being seen as assertive, she's not respected at all because she's breaking out of the template of what is considered to be the female affirming, nurturing, give space, hold space model. So I may not care about it, but others do. And so, how do I cross the bridge from I don't care, but others do? Is there a level of sensitivity that we should be approaching this with, which allows us to honor ourselves as well as the other person?
I think it's paradoxical. One of the things that I have clearly experienced in coaching people into senior leadership positions over the years is if that you seek validation, you won't get it. It's almost the point when you don't need the validation anymore, that's when you get it. Have you experienced that? Right? If we're
Yeah.
needy for the validation, so if we're needy to be liked and if we're needy to be respected, we get neither. Now, I understand that the nuance that you have is about reputation management. I know that people will judge me. And we started this with me jokingly say, you didn't like me. And I'm aware of my physiology that I look a bit like a nightclub bouncer, right? I'm follically challenged and I'm a big guy. So I'm aware that I have that impact and I will moderate it up until a point in certain circumstances, up until a point, right? Because I'm reading the room. I'm wanting to know that, I don't want to burst into a room and terrify people. I want to make sure people are comfortable. But there's only a point that I can do because you saw through the initial bias and you made the connection and we had an honest connection. Now, what I tell people is, yes, your reputation management is a thing and are concerned about your reputation. However, you can't be needy for it. Focus on the value proposition. Realize they will make judgments. And the interesting thing is that those judgments are going to be made. You hope they're for the best. You do everything to make sure they're at the best, and then you let go. Because if you're needy for it, it isn't coming. And that's the best advice I can give.
There are 12 people live on the call right now with us. I would love for you to weigh in the chat as to what do you think about the things that Andrew and I are talking about, and how would you challenge this conundrum of likability and respectability that women sometimes have to. I think I would really love to see in comments. Are you with us? Are you against us? Are you having a different perspective that we should be listening to? This is a co-created conversation, and Andrew and I would love to hear from you. You know what you said there, Andrew? The part that I think is most important, where it all begins, is do I have the awareness of the impact that I'm having on other people? I
Yep.
think that awareness is everything.
Yes. Well, I define executive presence as the ability to project gravitas, confidence, poise under pressure, and the ability to read the room.
Right.
You need
Yeah.
to be able to read the room. But there's only so much that you can alter. Now we have a statement. Let me read this from Looney. I've always been challenged about likability and respectability. Several years ago, I had my then manager give a feedback that I'm not likable by people and I'm assertive. And young women need to be likable if they want others to hear what they have to say. I'm glad I listened to myself, stood by myself, and made sure I did what I have to do, and I delivered my work flawlessly. Well, a round of applause to you, Looney. You certainly are agreeing perspective, but here's what I would say. I don't need you to agree with my perspective because I know, but I'm very much appreciative that we are on the same page. Okay, so we're doing well. Now, I've got one to challenge you for, Tanvi. I've got one to challenge you. And because you introduced me to this term, and I wonder whether this is particularly for the women on the call. It is the tiara syndrome. And I'd never come across the tiara syndrome until you said it. And so I'd like you to describe the tiara syndrome. And I want to challenge you, is there a cure for it? So they might not even know they've got the tiara syndrome. So what's the tiara syndrome and is there a cure?
Yeah, I use that term a lot, Andrew, and I love it when we both use vocabulary that the other is not familiar with. It just allows us both to learn. The has who's watching us live, have you ever heard of this tiara syndrome? If you have, let me know in the comments. If not, just say no. But the tiara syndrome is a term that is used when we are talking about people. I want to say people, not just women, but tiara is usually women, right? So women who believe that all they have to do is keep their head down and work really, really hard, and somebody will come and put a crown on their head, right? They will be crowned for all the incredible hard work they do. So, Kim Looney and Shija, you heard it first here in the LinkedIn Live, the term tiara syndrome. So, they are waiting, and Kumud hadn't heard it before as well. So, they're waiting for someone to applaud them, to give them that crown because they performed so well, they've got the results, and aren't all of us just promote those people who have given us results? Is results what really matters?
Right.
And I think that to anyone who is still living under that illusion, I would like to burst that bubble right. It is never just results that matter, because results are a necessary but insufficient condition for you to move forward in your career and leadership success. Am I right, Andrew?
You are, and men, and I don't. We're going to have to find a male version, perhaps, for the tiara, um, or the crown. Yeah, I mean, nobody's coming on a white horse to rescue you, and there's certain magical thinking that kids have. If I do the following things, this will be the result, and you can get into obsessive disorder. If I knock 3 times, I'm safe. It's in that it's a form of mental model and schema that if I do the work, I'd be rewarded. Now, perhaps if the world was fair, that would be the case, but life is not fair. And we are indexed not just for the work we do, but the perception of our impact and value. And so we need, just like we talked about reading the room, being aware of our impact, we need to multiply our impact. We need to articulate the value proposition. You can't just do a thing, you need to be able to socialize that as well. And a lot of people struggle with that because they want to be humble, they don't want to talk about it. I love, as a man, perhaps, the beginning of The Godfather. Godfather One is a movie all about power. It's very Machiavellian, and I think it appeals to men a little bit more than women, but maybe not. And the opening scene, the Godfather is receiving people for favors on his daughter's wedding, and there's this great scene where the Undertaker comes and asks for a favor, and eventually, after challenging him for his loyalty, the Godfather says, I will do this for you as a favor, no charge. However, one day, and that day may never come, that I need this favor repaid, I would expect it to be repaid. And it's just beautiful is that we are doing these things, but we need to get an IOU in such a way that, hey, I'm doing this because it's my job, but just when the time comes for a promotion, I want to know that this has been valued, or this is my contribution to the project. In academia, as you know, you want your name on the paper because otherwise it doesn't count.
Yeah. So I think that women, I know hardworking, talented women who give a lot to their work. They go above and beyond. But when they are not being able to convey the value of their work, when they are not able to, what I like to call make sure that their personal brand is in alignment with their career goals, there is always a chance of derailment. And then asking this question, well, I hit the numbers and I didn't get that role or I didn't get that position, it's a little bit late in the day for that conversation. So I think this is an idea that definitely needs to. So there are a lot of more people who joined us a little bit late. So I want to just recap some of the ideas we've challenged. We've challenged this idea of women are more emotional, right? That was one, which is such a common one. Then we talked about this likability versus respectability, which seems to be a challenge that a lot of women seem to have. I want to be respected, but I'm told if I'm not liked, I won't be respected. Well, how do you deal with that? And then we challenge this idea of, the tiara syndrome. All I have to do is hard work and it'll get recognized and valued. That's not how it ever happens. So here's the one I want you to challenge, Andrew. And by the way, all the 15 of you who are on the call, LinkedIn Live right now, if there's a statement you want us to challenge together, make sure you comments, because if we have time, we'll definitely come to it. I think we should challenge a few things together. That's what this International Women's Day theme is all about. So, Andrew, let's talk about challenging this idea of which I find is very, very common. It doesn't matter if it's women, the younger women or the women or the senior women, or even senior women. Some of the ones who I coach who are straight headed into the boardroom, I am shocked and surprised and dismayed, if I might say, at this obsession with perfectionism.
Yep.
What do you have to say to that?
Well, I think perfectionism is poison. Um, and I really need to say it that strongly because I see it poison so much. One of my Silicon Valley clients has put together some leadership principles. And you might know that Amazon has 14 leadership principles, and they borrowed this one a bit from Amazon, which is progress over perfection. Is we need to focus on the delta. Are we moving things forwards? Because perfectionism is terrifying, and women seem to, more than men, and there's been research in this field and about this, that women tend to feel that unless it's perfect, they are not perfect. Unless it's perfect, they are not valuable. And yet men are much happier with, are we moving the ball towards the end zone? It doesn't have to be a perfect pass, but did it move forwards? Now, again, massive gender generalizations there, and I know I could be challenged on those. But here's what I want to do about perfectionism. And because perfectionism overdone can lead to pessimism, right? Is seeing everything badly. And I was doing a coaching session with a senior female leader just this week. And I could see that because she was pushing everything to perfection, she was grading everything as not good enough. And so there was a generalization. And I said, look, what I want you to do is create a continuum, right? With 10 being Pollyanna optimism, everything's going to turn out fine, and 1 is everything's terrible, everything's going to hell. Where's your current set point? Where are you looking at things? And she was at a 2.5 and a 3. So she was never going to, so if she did all the work on it, it was never going to be a 10. I said, well, you got to step off that scale, move up and try a different lens, try framing it different. And this is my challenge around perfectionism. It is out there. And I think it's great to do fantastic work. It's great to have detail. But the higher you go up an organization, the broader spectrum you're going to have, the faster things are going to change, the more ambiguous things are going to be, and you'll never get it perfect. And I love asking people, have they seen Toy Story 1? And I ask, if you saw Toy Story 1, are you Woody or Buzz? Because Woody is the perfectionist. Woody is the micromanager, and every toy has to be in its place, whereas Buzz is on a mission. All right. And Buzz, all right, says he can fly. And Woody says, no, you can't. He jumps off the end of the bed, spins around the fan and on the Hot Wheels set, and lands back on the bed. And Woody says, that's not flying, that's falling with style. And honestly, particularly as you go higher in an organization, I think you're just going to be falling with style. So it's not going to be perfect. All right. But be Buzz on a mission. That's my view on that one.
To infinity and beyond.
To infinity and beyond. That's the mission. All right.
You know, here's the thing. I heard Brené Brown once say this, and I love. If you haven't discovered Brené Brown to anybody's call, I think you should. Um, is that you should not worry about perfectionism because nobody has ever reached it, ever. And that, every painting in this world, every monument in this world, every act of creation in this world could have been better. And so, learning to make peace with this is good enough as it is. And so here's an interesting issue that has been raised on the chat about, you know, are women more bothered about perfectionism because society expects that of them? And my I I would choose to challenge. I would choose to challenge that by saying there are some things in which the expectation is higher, but it's not just for women, it's also for men.
Yeah.
How well men are doing, how much they are earning, how they are, taking care of the family. They are imposed similar standards of perfectionism in certain areas, and women are imposed perfectionism in other areas. But in general, on average, do we see a higher level of obsession with getting it just right? Now, just because society is imposing that on you doesn't mean you have to accept it, right? You can
Yeah.
choose to challenge. Yes, I am. For a very long time, Andrew, in my introduction, in the keynotes, I used to add this line, and I think I'm going to add it back again. That Tanvi feels her biggest achievement in life is learning to be an imperfect mother.
Yeah.
And I think parenting has taught me so much about accepting the imperfection in me that I had to stop after a while and say, I'm not going to drive myself crazy over the fact that I must bake these cupcakes and take them to the school because everybody is expected as a mom to bake a cupcake and take it to the school, right? I'm not less of a mother if I'm not baking as many cupcakes. So yes, you're right. That is that expectation that is put on women, but are you choosing to accept it? That's what
Yeah.
we would like to invite you to
Yeah.
challenge. Yes, there is that expectation, but are you going to be able to challenge it?
So our LinkedIn user from Europe, whose name we don't have, unfortunately, has asked, how can women overcome this conditioning? Well, firstly, it's the awareness that it is conditioning. If you're labeling it as conditioning, then you have an opportunity to step back and choose to challenge it. And there's a mind line, a reframe that I shared in my LinkedIn Live last week. I think you saw that, Tanvi. And I shared this with one of my women leaders. And I said, say this: I have nothing to prove, only things to improve. And it worked brilliantly, and I've adopted it for myself. I have nothing to prove, only things to improve. We are all on a journey, and this is where self-leadership comes in, to be the best version of ourselves. I look behind me, and there's Andrew 1.0, Andrew 2.0. I'm probably on Andrew 59.0 right now, approaching Andrew 60.0, and Andrew 60.0 is going to be better than Andrew 59.0. And I think if we just see that this is a line of progression and evolution, that we're moving, as long as we're better than yesterday, as long as we are moving, as long as there's a delta, then there's motivation in that. But yes, step one, recognize it is conditioning and go, no, that's somebody else's map, but that's somebody else's narrative. It's not one I choose to adopt. And the rejection of the frame or the conditioning and the choice to choose to challenge that frame and say, this is what I want to do. This is how I want to turn up. That's the beginning of the transformation.
I absolutely agree. And just in the chat, Shireen agrees about that phrase I have nothing to prove, only things to improve. I'm mindful of the time because we are almost coming to the end of this live. I think the only other thing I would add to that is learn to have a sense of humor about your faults. Get it right. You're not
Yep.
always going to get it right. When somebody turns and tells you this is the most horrible, you know, dish I've ever eaten in my life, say, my goodness, that is an accomplishment that I managed to give you the most horrible dish I may have ever cooked. Or, I remember one time when I was in a voluntary role and I was taking minutes and I was told, well, we've never seen such bad minutes. And I'm like, what can I say? I was born to take minutes. You don't have to take everything seriously. Learn to let a few things go. Don't hand every single piece of feedback should not be accepted and certainly not be internalized. You thank the other person for their feedback and bless them and let them go on their way. That certainly is one strategy to try and get over this, feeling of perfectionism. We've talked
Very good.
about we've talked about women being more emotional than men. That was an idea that we challenged. Then we challenged this idea of likability versus respectability. We talked about the tiara syndrome that women often suffer from. And then we rounded it up with this issue of perfectionism that we often face when we are coaching leaders. And Kim says to challenge is to control. That's exactly right, Kim. You have to take control of the narrative. The narrative and the story that you want to live. And that's such a liberating feeling. I'm so glad this year the theme is choose to challenge.
Very good. So do we have one last thing to challenge, or shall I begin the wrap up?
Well, I think unless somebody has anything to say, we are close to the time we had decided. So I think,
Yep.
Andrew, you might want to
Okay.
bring this
Okay, so terrific. So I do hope that our watchers and listeners have got some value from this. I've had some fun. Um, I do want to take a moment to say what's next. So full caveat, I'm going to talk about an offer that you and I have, and that is only for the people that feel that this is useful and they want more of it, and how they might go about investing in their own education and their own development. So if you want to hear nothing of that, this is the time to log off. I'm only going to take about 30 seconds. I'm just going to take you off screen for a moment, Tanvi, but you're not going away. So it's just my screen so that people can see. I'm going to make myself, here I am behind my screen, and I'm going to make myself even smaller. For you, we have the Self Leadership Executive Presence Accelerator. And the URL for that is selfleadership.com/executive presence accelerator. This is a 6-week pre-recorded coaching program that has helped many men and women to step up to executive presence. And because you were on this LinkedIn Live, we're going to send you out. Is this a physical or a soft copy? But we'll be sending a copy of Tanvi's book, The Spark Lies Within, as part of this. You won't see that on the landing page for this because Tanvi only just told me she was doing it. So I put it together in 5 minutes before. So the selfleadership.com/executive presence accelerator is a program incorporating many of the ideas that Tanvi and I have shared with you. So I'll bring Tanvi back and you can clarify for me. Let me make myself bigger. There we go. You can clarify for me. Is that physical, soft copy? How are we going to ship that?
It's a soft copy. We probably have people sitting in Europe and US and everywhere else, and it's so much easier to get a soft copy across. Of course, they'll get access to a soft copy.
Super. So selfleadership.com/. All right, Executive Presence Accelerator. And if you have a challenge with that, just message me on LinkedIn and I'll probably put the hyperlink in the, actually, I could put the hyperlink in the chat. Oh, I can't I'll put the hyperlink in the chat box afterwards. That's for anybody there. I thank you for being with us today. I hope this has given you the courage to have the choice to challenge. I am absolutely humbled to be the son of a mother, to be the brother to sisters, and to be the father of daughters. And I am super happy to have great female friends like yourself, Tanvi, in my life to challenge me, because what I find is strong women make men better men. That is my experience. So I always surround myself with strong women because it challenges me to be the best version of me. So thank you very much, Tanvi, and over to you to bring us home.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I really enjoyed it. I always enjoy all the perspectives you bring, and just like strong men strong women help men become stronger. It's just quite the other way as well. And I think ultimately what we are looking for is partnership, because the society we live in, the corporate world we work in, brings its biases and its assumptions, and it's, puts it on men as much as it puts it on women. And unless we are there to challenge both together, it's not going to happen. So anyway, all of you who are here, Kim, Angela, Tulsi, Looney, Shireen, and Shub, and all of the others who joined us in and out, Steve, thank you for joining us. If you would like for us to do more LinkedIn Lives together on other topics, please connect with Andrew or myself over LinkedIn and let us know what your suggestions are. Who knows? We might make this like a Thursday night spy for love. I always love hanging out with you. I just
Like we've got nothing else to do, right? All right, but I'm happy to have shared values. So it's a good morning or good night to wherever you are. Lunchtime for people in Europe. It's a pleasure. All right, stay safe and keep challenging and keep choosing.